Good evening, and welcome to the City of Topeka Planning Commission. We are a commission appointed by the mayor and city council to plan for the orderly growth and development of the community, to hold public hearings, and to make recommendations to the city council on planning items. Please note that the city council rules state that public hearings for planning cases shall be conducted solely by the planning commission. No additional public hearings will be conducted by the city council. Tonight's cases are tentatively scheduled to be heard by the City Council next month. Agendas can be found at topeka.org. For cases that require public hearings, the procedure will be as follows. First, the Planning Department staff will summarize the case. Next, we will hear from the applicant or their representative. Then we will receive public testimony. Public comments should be addressed solely to the chair and are limited to 4 minutes. Chris, please take the roll.
Commissioners Dean,
Here.
Freed,
Here.
Reisner,
Present.
Halp,
Here.
Nager,
Here.
Pearson,
Here.
Tababin,
Here.
and Warner.
Here.
Ms. Herron is absent this evening, but we do have 8 for a quorum.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the August 15, 2022 meeting. Are there any changes or corrections to be made? Not hearing any, I would then call for a motion to approve the minutes.
Move approval as submitted.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Chris, please call the roll.
Commissioners Dean.
Aye.
Freed.
Aye. Oh, I'm
Reisner.
sorry, I need to abstain. I was not here.
Oh, okay. Reisner. Abstain. Kalp.
Aye.
Nager.
Abstain.
Pearson.
Here. Yes.
Tababin.
Aye.
And Warner.
Aye.
Okay, we have 3 ayes, 0 noes, and 3 abstaining. I'm sorry, 4 yeses.
All right, next item is recognition of outgoing and incoming planning commissioners. Good time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to take a minute or two just to recognize our new commissioners on the bench tonight. Commissioner Preisner, Commissioner Nager. Is that your same seat, Commissioner Preisner? Or was next? Okay. We welcome you back to the dais, as it may be. And thank you, both of you, for jumping on a moving train here. We appreciate it. But with that pleasant news also comes some unpleasant news in that we had to say goodbye to a couple commissioners. Commissioner Kennard cannot be here tonight, but I see Commissioner Messina is. And she has her entourage. So can I ask you to come up to the podium here and bring whoever you would like, for that matter. We would let. Come on. We need to get them on camera. There.
I had 2 kids while sitting up here.
So we do not expect that of all commissioners. I just want to let you know. That was unique. I will say this. She's correct. Commissioner Messina started here with a. She gained a new name while she was here.
Yep.
She gained some new people while she was here, as you can see. And her husband Matt we know very well. And I will also say that she was probably in my 25 years. You were our only bona fide, professional, certified planner on the planning commission. Everyone else usually comes from a different background, and you had a planning background and made your time very special here. I have to say, you brought a perspective that we didn't have, and we want to hopefully can carry that on. You grew, and so I want to make sure you're, yeah. Again, not a requirement for all commissioners, but just want to say how much we appreciate your work. I do have a memento here that I'd like to read, and then we can see if anybody wants to say anything. So let me come down and read this for you all. Hi there. We need to get the platform up. Okay, presented by the City of Topeka this 17th day of October 2022 in recognition of Ariane Messina for her service to the city as a member of the Topeka Planning Commission. Planning Commissioner, October 2016 to September 2022, signed Michael Apadilla, City of Topeka Mayor. Outgoing comments are always welcome.
Oh, gosh. Well, I do really appreciate the opportunity. Matt and I had only lived in Topeka for 3 months. And we randomly met Bill Fyander, and he's like, oh my gosh, when he found out about our degrees. So yeah, our entire life in Topeka has had me on the Planning Commission. So very bittersweet to be leaving it, but I joke all the time with Matt, we're probably going to retire here because that's how happy we are here. So I just really appreciate the opportunity to get back to our city. So thanks so much.
We're going to miss you. Thank you.
Former Commissioner Messina, I just wanted to say whenever I'm driving around in other locations and I see one of those temporary signs, I always say, that's a Messina sign. All right, next item on the agenda is declaration of conflict of interest or ex parte communications by members of the commission or the staff. Okay, not hearing any, we will then move on to item E on the agenda, action items. Number 1 is Miller's Reserve subdivision number 2, and there are 3 parts to that, Mr. Fyander, so I didn't know how you were intending to, are we having to deal with each of those separately or all together?
We can present kind of a package, if you will, but yeah, action-wise, because one is a recommendation. So the first one, the annexation, is just purely a recommendation. The plat is an official, you approve the plat. So it might be best to, unfortunately, take each 3, but we will talk about them in sequence.
All right.
So.
Evening, Commissioners. So I'm going to be doing the annexation and the major plat. So this is annexation 22-01 by Doltmeyer Rollenhagen LLC. So this is a request for annexation of approximately 14. Hello? Okay, so this is a unilateral annexation, and the property owner has consented to the annexation of the property. It is contiguous with the city. Review of annexation by the Planning Commission is not required by state law, but the Land Use and Growth Management Plan 2040 brings annexation greater than 10 acres to the Planning Commission for review. So as previously stated, this is a unilateral annexation, and the property owner has consented to that annexation. This requires the City of Topeka governing body's approval. The subject property is located approximately 1,175 feet south of Southwest 21st Street and 450 feet west of Southwest Indian Hills Road. The property lies within Tier 2 of the urban growth area. Tier 2 areas are contiguous to the city and are the next priority for Topeka's future urban growth, since this is where Topeka has already made investment in the infrastructure and services. So again, we already have these services and infrastructure available. The next part of this, and we'll touch on this a little bit more as we move forward, this is the final plat, which again we'll cover in some more detail. But this development would provide 22 single-family homes on those 14.7 acres, so that's 1.5 dwelling units an acre. And this concept shows the lots in connection with Southwest Lowell Lane, kind of on that east side there, connecting to the south. And I would take any questions.
Are there any questions of staff?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Bryson, just one question about the annexation. On page page 3 of the agenda documents, map 1. Can you tell me what portions of the area in light blue, the Tier 1 area, I know it's outside the area, the subject area for the annexation, but what is already being served by the Sherwood Improvement District or Sewer District versus City of Topeka?
I don't know exactly where those lines of delineation would be. This would be served by the Sherwood Sewer District, so
Right.
that would be part of that as well, and the county has been contacted about that. So I don't know where exactly that line is drawn specifically, but this would be served by Sherwood.
Well, can anyone tell me where, if any part of the light blue, the Tier 1, is presently served by Sherwood?
Commissioner, I think the area to the east is, and then I think the area to the south, that blue on the west side of Indian Hills, I believe that's also Sherwood.
I'm sorry, Dan, I couldn't quite, just to the area to the west of the subject property?
The area to the west of Indian Hills Road and south of the subject property, that larger blue area, I believe is
Okay.
Sherwood. And then to the east of that subject property is Sherwood also.
I assume that the arrangement with the Sherwood Improvement District, the district has boundaries that are set by the county commission where they form the sewer district. So the arrangement with the city is any property lying within the Sherwood district is going to be served by the Sherwood
Yes.
sewer district.
Yes.
Any other questions? All right, and I don't believe we do a public hearing on this, is that correct? So if there's no other questions for staff, is there a motion?
Mr.
Brian
Chairman,
Knight.
I would move that the planning commission make a finding that, a recommendation that the subject property is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Mr. Cobb. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
We have a second. With that, Chris, would you call the roll, please? Oh, I guess, any further discussion? Now you may call for the vote, Chris.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, if I may, also, you asked if this was a public hearing. It's not an official public hearing, but that doesn't mean you can't ask to see if there's anybody that would like to speak on the
Okay.
item as well. So I'm sorry I missed that.
All right. Is there anybody present who would like to speak on this matter regarding the annexation of the subject property? All right, no one is coming forward? Chris, call for the vote, please.
Okay, I'll call the roll from the bottom up this time. Commissioners Warner,
Aye.
Tabavin,
Aye.
Pearson,
Aye.
Nager,
Aye.
Kalp,
Aye.
Reisner,
Aye.
Freed,
Aye.
and Dean.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0 with none abstaining.
All right, next we go to item B, which is the preliminary and final plat. Mr. Risley, I assume you're handling that as well.
Yes. As you said, this is the preliminary and final plat for Miller's Reserve Number 2, also by Diltmeyer Rollenhagen LLC. So just to start off, a little bit of a note on this. The legal description that you have in your agenda packet, there is a small change that is not quite right. And we have received a revised version of that. So just letting you know that there has been a small revision made there. So this is a major plat and represents the final phase of the Miller's Glen and Miller's Reserve, which are kind of those other portions we saw that to the north, east, and south of this major plat. Again, there are going to be 22 parcels for this, making up 14.7 acres, and we're south of Southwest 21st Street and west of Southwest Indian Hills Road. As you can see, again, all of those areas to the north, east, and south have been platted. As we kind of touched on already, this is located within the urban growth area and is a Service 2, Tier 2, meaning that the infrastructure and services are available. Here we have the preliminary plat. And here we have the final plat. Again, this is 22 lots. One thing to note is that Southwest Lowell Lane is a single access point into this subdivision. This was brought to the Board of Building and Fire Appeals for a variance to the number of access points. It's a private road that would connect to the north, but this variance allowed for one access point to the subdivision. And with that, staff is recommending approval of Miller's Reserve Number 2, and that it be forwarded to the City Council for its acceptance of land to be dedicated for public purposes, subject to the conditions in the staff report below. I would take any questions.
Any questions of staff? Yes, sir. Neighbor?
Yeah. It struck me that that is quite a few homes with only one point of entry, like you mentioned. My understanding is that like there's a good specific reason for that in this case. I guess my hope is that as we're looking at other ones, we can avoid that so that we can continue to have that connected, walkable neighborhood, like bullet point that we're hoping to have with the that they found in the comprehensive plan. Also, I guess I just wanted to give the public some knowledge that that is something very specific to the nature of this situation at this very specific plot of land.
Thank you. As far as it goes, make sure I say it accurately, the Board of Building and Fire Appeals, that's really what kind of dictated or allowed for this to have that single point access. So that kind of drove how those roads were. Yeah, so that's kind of the extent of that there, and they did approve that. Was there? I just want to make sure there wasn't anything else I missed as far as question-wise.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr.
I'd like to follow up on that, on the point about the waiver. And I understand it went to this technical review committee because it was a variance from the city code, not from a technical code, a building code, not a variance from any of the land use regulations. But historically, has the planning department not had a seat at the table in these proceedings? I mean, I'm also concerned about the fact there's only one entrance, one exit off the property, but it doesn't look like with the granting of the variance that this body or the governing body has any ability to second guess that. Maybe other objections to the plat, but this has been asked and answered without any input from the planning department. Bill, is that fair to say or not?
I think how you should view this, Commissioner and fellow commissioners, would be, it is a recommendation still to you. You ultimately have the final plat authority. So the recommendation from the Board of Building and Fire Appeals is to allow a variance to the number of points of access. This is a bit unique, I would say, as you can tell by how it's developed around there. It is not ultimately, it is, the land there has exchanged hands and developed a little bit more piecemeal, if you will. I think ultimately the die was a bit cast by approval of the previous subdivision just to the southeast of that. Once you have a public street coming into a private street, it makes it very difficult, I think, from just an operational standpoint for the people who are maintaining the private street to allow public access on the private streets. And that's something we as a planning staff would recommend against, is we don't want to necessarily create that situation. And so the next step would be, if you don't want the public street and the private public street access onto a private street access that is not under control of that subdivision, is it safe? And that was the next kind of level of decision-making. And so from a safety standpoint, we could have had a connection there just for fire. We could have had a connection that could have had a gates for fire purposes. Fire was recommending that that was not, that is not necessarily something that they have to have, but by code they would. And so that's why I went to the appeals board. So in the end, it is truly a recommendation, provided you approve the plat in this manner. It is not something, if you decide, no, there should be an access point, not to create a whole, another ball of wax here, but if you decide there needs to be an access point, then that is something that is still in your purview for the plat.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, Bill, I want to follow that, make sure I'm understanding it correctly. So the way I read the staff report is that the variance was granted. So I've understood that the only way we could, if for some reason we objected to that the only recourse was to deny the plat. But you're saying that we could approve the plat on the condition that there be 2 access points to the property, notwithstanding the variance that was granted by this review board, the appeal board.
Yeah, I think as long as there's something in the subdivision regulations that give you that authority, and there's 2 things. There is a dead end or cul-de-sac length in the subdivision regulations. There's also, it has to be conforming to the comprehensive plan as well. So those jump out as the 2 things that you would have to hang your hat on, so to speak, if this was a condition. And I would say if it does go to that point, it would definitely be something you don't want to, I'm not sure deny would be the right term at this point, but to table might be the better route to go.
And Bill, I'm just trying to understand what the ground rules are here. I'm sure the applicant will want to speak to this, but it's my questions are largely around the significance of the Board of Building and Fire Appeals Board action, particularly when we talk about the fire code. And in looking at the report here, the action report, the assistant fire marshal was attending, but doesn't have a vote on the matter. And it may be in the report here somewhere where the fire department's official position is, whether they weighed in that it was okay. And I think you said something just a moment ago to indicate that they did not have objections. But if that's in the report, I missed it. That's kind of significant. And I haven't formed an opinion about this, one way or the other. It's just kind of, it is an odd configuration, and there are a number of dead-end streets that are created by the plat.
Yeah, I think there was 2 options here. One was just to create an access so that for fire purposes, to continue a street access, maybe with gated, with a gate. We would not recommend having a public street access onto a private street sort of situation like this would be. That puts too much of a burden. It's not really how it was planned to be, but at this point, the horse is a bit out of the barn here with how the plats around it have been approved. And so you have the option of having a fire service, extend the street for fire service, or not extend the street at all. That's really what the options we were looking at. And I'm not aware of any objection that there was from fire to either, if that's safe to say. So I think the developer applicant went to would rather have a more definitive cannot extend the street. That would actually help in this case. So that's what was presented to the board, and they found in favor. So you commission are the ultimate deciders on the conditions of the plat. I think that decision allowed it to get to this point. If that makes sense. So that board's decision allowed it to get at least to this point. Yeah.
Thank you, Bill. Mr. Chairman, I've got 2 other quicker questions.
Fire away.
Thank you. Bryson, the streets, maybe my eyesight, but I can't tell on the plat here. Will there be sidewalks, curb and gutter on the property?
There will be sidewalks. As far as curb and gutter, yes,
Okay. The sidewalks one side of the street or two sides? I think
both.
both sides. Okay, the adjoining properties looked like they had one. Yeah, okay, thank you. Last thing, Bryson. Talking about the plat notes, and I'm on page 4 of the staff report, make reference to the general drainage easement, substitute language for the plat note on general drainage easement, and then also on the stream buffer note. And I could not tell, I didn't have my magnifying glass, I couldn't tell if those, what notes those are replacing on the map, plat map that we have provided.
I don't.
While he's looking at that, my understanding is there's some updated language with this note, and that the note that's on the plat right now had the outdated language. So that's,
I'm sorry, Bill, can you repeat that?
the note on the plat has outdated language for this note. This is a standard boilerplate note.
Okay,
And so I don't know if Bryson or any of us know the exact word.
so the
There's probably a
replacement,
word that got changed.
okay, the replacement language doesn't refer to notes that are on the map that's in the agenda material.
Just to confirm, Mr. Commissioner, so we're talking about number 6 on page 4?
Right, 5 and 6.
Correct. So there were changes to that language. That is something that we are in the process of changing to be the new solidified language for those general drainage easements and the stream buffer. So that is why those are in there. What we have currently on the plat was the old language, and we are pushing for that, or we are requesting for that to be changed to the new language.
Right, and that's my question, Bryson. I
Yes.
couldn't tell what, on the plat map here, what notes were being
If you
replaced.
look on the backside, Commissioner Cow, I think you'll see one is titled General Drainage Easement, another one is titled Stream Buffer Note. On the right side,
Okay, under the
Just above the certificate of surveyor.
column that says legal description.
yes.
Correct.
One down there, okay. Okay, thank you. I did not see that. That's it,
Any
Mr.
further
Chairman.
questions, Mr. Cow?
That's it.
I
for
just,
Go ahead, Ms. Pearson.
all right, I just had a couple of quick questions. I want to make sure that I'm on the same page as everyone. Going back to the original question, is it a safety issue about the access points or not?
Yes, Commissioner Pearson, the issue of access is how many homes, lots, people can be in a dead-end situation. So, yes, sometimes there is for instance, if you could not get to, if there's something blocking the road to get to this street, then that's your only way in and out. That could present a safety issue. But as to where that line is in terms of, okay, is 31 lots acceptable or 32 lots or not, or whatever there is a standard, and that's what they went to the appeals board to get approved.
To get the standard waived? So the city, the county has a particular position as to what that number is, but them going to the fire department got that waived? Is that correct? I'm just trying to make sure I understand.
Sure, is this fire code?
Fire
Yeah,
code.
so we have a fire code adopted by the city that requires more than one point of access over a certain number of lots.
And what is that number?
Do we have that? I seem to recall it's 30, but, how many lots? But it's 30.
It's 30.
Yeah.
And how many lots are we dealing with here?
not 30, but that means,
There's 20,
go ahead.
there's 22 in this subdivision plat, but because of the properties to the southeast that were platted previously, those come into account as well. As far as the exact count, I don't have that right.
Well, I guess that takes me to my next question about horses and barns and stuff. Is there any measure that we can do right now to help control that horse getting out of the barn, or is it a moot point?
Commissioner Pearson, this property was originally part of a larger development that was intended all for private streets. And so it's at a point not that long ago when they basically came in and split part of that out for public streets as opposed to private. That was a decision. That's the horse I'm referring to.
So there's no corrective action we can take now?
No, the only action would be to require a secondary fire access with this plat in conflict with fire department's support of the variance. So we would have to get, if you want the fire staff to be here and give a better reason than I can as to why they felt that way, that would be a next step in this.
Okay. All right. I think I understand now. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll now ask the property owner or the representative to come up and speak.
Good evening, Jeff Lawback, SBB Engineering, the civil engineer for the project. I'll add a little bit to the fire code issue. We have worked close with Dylan Smith with the fire department, and one of the limit is 30 lots. The one exception, there's kind of a list of exceptions that allows you to go more than 30. And one of those exceptions was if your buildings are fire sprinkled, or if your buildings are sprinkled, which, typically applies to multifamily structures. So as a kind of concession or to meet the intent of the code, we agreed to add additional fire hydrants in the cul-de-sac. So there'd be kind of one where we're tying in to Miller's Reserve Phase 1, and then one at the kind of the T intersection, and then one on both ends of the cul-de-sac. And so that's kind of what the board appeal was, to meet the intent of the code for fire safety.
Yeah, that's a good, thank you. Typically, when you're dealing with the building or code or the fire code, and you do a variance such as this, there is usually an equivalency that you're asked to meet. And that, I thank you, we were not aware of what that equivalency was, so appreciate that.
All right. And I'll be here for any other questions that you may have.
I do have a question. But the equivalency for the sprinkler system is inside the building normally, right? So that's happening and it doesn't require access. All we're talking about is more hydrants, so that still requires access by the fire department to access that in order to put out the fire. So if access is blocked, whether you've got 1 hydrant or 12 hydrants, that doesn't really increase the safety, does it? The same way you would if you individually sprinkled the building.
Well, there was other stipulations as well. Current fire code access is for a 20-foot wide drive aisle. We're providing a 29-foot wide street, back to back. And, if you look on these aerials, there's hardly ever a car. I mean, there might be maybe a car or two, but typically driving through these subdivisions, there's no car parked. There's not really any street parking out there. Most of these homes have big enough driveways to accommodate people parking along the street. So that was another part. So the fire department and the board kind of took these factors in when looking at this to determine that they were okay with it.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on the last point, sir, I guess I was looking at this and the public safety concern was if there was somehow a blockage on Southwest Lowell Lane as opposed to the street that has the cul-de-sac end to end, and that being the single point of access to this addition, that creates the safety issue. And the conditions that were set by the Fire Appeal Board, none of those pertain to Lowell Lane, which is already in place, right?
Well, it is also 29-foot back-to-back, the city standard residential street. But the fire code for a fire access is 20 feet. So we're pointing out that.
That's good. I can't tell that from the plat map, so.
Yeah.
So Southwest Lowell Lane is 29
Yeah,
foot.
so if a car was stalled or something, there would be enough room for a fire truck to get around.
Thank you.
Chair, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So I see that this density is actually a little bit less than, comparable, but a little bit less than the surrounding land use. As well as it's currently zoned that it can be like duplexes and such. I guess I'm wondering what was the thinking about alternating from that towards a single family dwelling area.
So so to the north is Miller's Glen, and that was a PUD. And so Miller's Glen and Miller's Reserve, that was all part of a PUD that allowed for a pretty high density. You can see in Miller's Glen, the density is much greater than this. So that was done in early 2002, 2003. So around the 2006 or 2008 mark, I believe that developer at the time had a hard time developing everything within Miller's Glen. So that's when he broke out Miller's Reserve with the larger lots to try and create a different market, different price point, at that time. So that's why there was a preliminary plat in 2013, 2014 that basically had these 45 lots. Miller's Reserve phase 1 that was constructed in 2016, and there's only a house or two or probably only a few vacant lots, and so that's why this would be the second phase, with the low density, bigger lots, and then the city also since that time came with different stormwater requirements. So there's a stream buffer here on the north side. So those are bigger easements than what would have been there in the original PUD.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, sounds like that having a bit of combination of both was helpful in the area.
And I might add, as Jeff said, the entire PUD, while it was zoned for duplex and commercial as well as single family, it was not, that commercial was at the far northeast corner of this entire tract at 21st and Indian Hills. And so you'll see the zoning in a second. We're getting rid of some commercial zoning. That was not necessarily for this island that we're annexing tonight. It was for a different part of the PUD. So it's a little, it's a little bit convoluted over time because of how it's been, how the vision changed for what this was going to be from what it was approved for.
Any other questions for the representative of the owner? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you wish to add?
No, I'm here for any other questions that might pop up.
All right, thank you. All right, we now will have open for comments by members of the public. If anyone would like to speak, please come up.
Hello, my name is Doug Wells. I'm on the board of directors of Miller's Glen, which is the community just to the north of this proposed area. I'm joined by our president, Stephanie Thompson, and vice president, Frank Kerr. We support the proposal as it's been amended. We do not, however, want a connection between Lowell Lane, which happens to be the street I also live on in Miller's Glen, and the new development. I'll explain some of the reasons why. We have private roads that we have funded. All 84 of our lots are developed now and have houses on them. Once that development and building was over, we spent over $150,000 that were privately contributed through an assessment by our homeowners to redo the road there. The last 2 years, we've spent homeowner funds through our HOA to fill cracks so that we could preserve the integrity of our private roads. We're kind of a private community, and we are willing to absorb our costs in maintaining our private roads in our private community. The fear is that if we connect to a public road, then we're going to have all this traffic and we're going to be faced with the responsibility of financing public access on our private roads at our expense. Whereas the other area would have public roads financed by the public. So that's a concern. We also don't want the traffic through there. Again, this is the history of this was there was a big development that now has been split into 3 different sectors: Miller's Glen, Miller's Reserve, and this area. Initially, they were all planned to be private roads, and in that event, the whole mass of people would be contributing to the maintenance and construction of the roads. When it got split into 3 divisions, there were public roads on the other 2, not on Miller's Glen. So that would create this is a real unique situation, is what I want to stress to you. This is not common that there would be this split up from the original PUD. So I'm hoping that the commission will agree that this, for the equities for Miller's Glen, as well as this being such a unique situation, will not require the connection of Lowell Lane into this new development. I'm available for questions.
Anybody have questions for the gentleman? All right, sir, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the plat? All right, not hearing any, I guess, as far as the public hearing, well, that's closed.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the preliminary and final plat as presented by staff.
All right, we have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion or questions of staff?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
the previous conferee, it was helpful to identify that there's private streets in this area, and it's probably in the staff report here somewhere, but I missed it. And it's part of the downside of allowing private streets. I have no idea at all as to how many miles or yards or whatever of private streets there are in the city of Topeka. But we're seeing here tonight a complication of an existing private road playing into the issue of fire safety, which is unfortunate in my mind. Is it possible, Mr. Chairman, if the commission's agreeable to it, I would like to have at some point the staff prepare a map designating where the private streets are within the city limits of Topeka. I don't know if if this is the only one, or if they're all over the place, Bill, but, and Bill, on the subject of, Bryson, Bill, your department, going back to the fire issue and the variance that was allowed, again, you didn't have a seat at the table, but I don't see anything in the staff report that indicates disagreement from your office with the conclusion or the action of the appeals committee. So you're comfortable, planning staff is comfortable with the configuration here with a single point of access to these proposed new homes?
Yes. Yes, we are. The only issue here was safety, and then we really defer to the safety experts, and that's fire and the Board of Fire Appeals.
I will throw in a comment that in a previous jurisdiction where I was dealing with the planning commission as the county counselor, we had some of these subdivisions where in the planning they forced the traffic through for fire safety. And other issues arose that we were having to deal with between the residents, including unapproved blockage of lanes and then people breaking through, literally fights in the street. It creates a bunch of other issues that I'm not saying that would happen here, but I've seen it where it grew ugly between the neighborhoods, mixing public and private streets. So I do share the concerns about the safety, but I've also seen when it's forced on, particularly the group that is privately funding their roads, it creates a lot of issues when a lot of public traffic starts moving through their subdivision. So,
But Mr. Chair, if I could, I mean, I've had prior experience with it too, and in this situation, the gentleman, I understand his concerns about any action by this body that would promote or encourage through traffic by non-residents, but point of fact, they take access onto their private road off of 21st Street. So if I want to drive out through that, on those private streets tomorrow or tonight, I can do so. Anybody's free to do so. So this is just a question of whether or not the second point of access would increase that traffic, and they're anticipating that it would, and it likely would.
right.
Right?
Any other comments, questions? All right, we have a motion and a second then. Chris, would you please call for the vote?
Mr. Dean?
Aye.
Mr. Freed?
Aye.
Mr. Preisner?
Aye.
Mr. Kalp?
Aye.
Mr. Nager?
Aye.
Ms. Pearson?
Aye.
Mr. Toboggan?
Aye.
And Mr. Warner.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0 with none abstaining.
That now takes us to the third item, dealing with Miller's Reserve Subdivision Number 2. And this is a zoning issue.
Mr. Chairman, Ian will take care of this one for us.
Good evening, planning commissioners. My name is Ian Fruff, an associate planner. This evening I'll be speaking with you about a case Z22/04 by Doltmeyer Roland Hagen. Some background on this property: it's currently zoned PUD planned unit development with M1 two-family dwelling district and C1 commercial district uses. And the proposed rezoning is to R1 single-family dwelling district. This property was zoned PUD in 2002 along with the properties to the north and south of it. However, this property has remained undeveloped since. The specific property was intended to be developed into a collection of single-family and duplex homes, but that has not happened. In 2014, the property to the south, Miller's Reserve Number 1, was rezoned from the same PUD designation to R1 single-family as well. And then on September 21st, 2022, a neighborhood information meeting was held with property owners within a 500-foot radius in the city limits and 1,000-foot radius in the county being notified of the meeting. About the property itself, it is 14.76 acres. 22 lots are proposed at a density of 1.49 dwelling units per acre. There is connection to Southwest Indian Hills Road via Millers Reserve South, Millers Reserve Sub number 1 to the south, and as has been spoken, not to the north through Miller's Glen subdivision. Surrounding land uses include the PUD, which it's currently part of to the north, as well as RR1 Residential Reserve out in the county. To the east, there is M1 two-family dwelling district and R1 single family. To the south, more RR1 in the county and R1 as well. And then to the west, R1 and RR1. As you can see, the proposed zoning is very consistent with the characteristics of surrounding neighborhoods and their zoning. As for the future land use map, it is part of the residential urban growth area and is marked as a Tier 2 service area. These are properties that are contiguous to the city and have the full suite of urban services readily available or able to be connected at the expense of the developer. They're considered high priority for development, and with that, staff recommends approval of this application. I'll now take any questions.
Are there any questions of staff? Not hearing any of the representative from the property owner wish to speak on this map.
Good evening again, Jeff Lawback, SBB Engineering. Just here for any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions for the owner's representative? All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Opening the public hearing, is there anyone for the public that wishes to speak on the zone change, this property? Okay, no one coming forward. We'll close the hearing. Is there any further questions or comments regarding the requested zone change?
I guess a better discussion, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
You know, in the, as far back as I can remember, the discussions about increasing the diversity of the housing stock and getting away from the heavy dependence on single-family. This looks like a step backwards. I mean, it looks like a step backwards. So I guess for me, I would like the minutes to reflect that, you know, I think in this situation, it's a matter of property that it's one of the remaining pieces of a larger parcel and probably never should have been zoned the way it was, or things have changed, circumstances have changed in a way that that does justify the build out of the property in single family, in my opinion. So.
Okay. Any other comments? I would just note that it seems that if we have concerns about access to fire safety, that reducing the density, actually in that regard, although moving backwards from the other things seems to make sense in this rare exception to what we're having to everything that's going on. If there's no other questions from staff, is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, based on the findings and analysis from staff report, I move to recommend the governing body approval of the reclassification of the property from PUD to M1 two-family dwelling district and C1 district uses to R1 single-family dwelling district.
Have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Is there any further discussion? Hearing any, Chris, would you please call for the vote?
Okay. Commissioners Warner,
Aye.
Tabavan,
Aye.
Pearson,
Nay.
Nager,
Aye.
Kalp,
Aye.
Reisner,
Aye.
Freed,
Aye.
and Dean.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-1 with none abstaining.
All right, next. On the item are presentations. First one is the second quarter development and growth management report.
Any other presentations?
Thank you. So, can I do that? I can. Good evening again, Commissioners. Time to time, usually mid-year and end of the year, we bring you a development and growth management report to give you an overview of the development trends in the community. Just, again, contextualize what's out there as you make your decisions. You're not necessarily, there's not going to be a test or anything like that. We just want you to be more informed. This is something that we would bring to you probably a month or so earlier. We did not meet in September, so I apologize. This is a little outdated, but from what I've seen, things have not changed. So whatever you see tonight, I would assume that those trends are continuing here in the last few months. Okay, so we want to look at a little bit of the permit activity to give us an idea of what kind of development trends are happening. This first slide gives you a sense of our just volume of development by way of building permits. You can see that it's down this year about 12% in the total number of building permits issued from last year. It is about 5% down from the 5-year average. So, and that makes perfect sense for us in terms of what's going on in the economy. A lot of uncertainty with inflation right now. We see a lot of things come into us or get talked about that aren't followed through on because of the ever volatility of the market right now. But when you break that down a little bit more between housing and commercial, we'll start with housing. Our housing units are also particularly significantly down from the previous year. You can see we're projecting by the end of the year to have 94 units of new housing units on this pace that we're on. Compare that to 394 units that were permitted last year, and 206 is our 5-year average. Again, this is not unique to Topeka, but it's just probably more of a confirmation of what you probably think is going on. And I would say the last couple months we're probably on that same trend. We might hit 100 at this pace. Likewise, we also could get a large project that could be permitted at any point here that we were expecting to be permitted. There's been one or two that have come through that have just not begun come in for permits yet. And if you get something in the 200 unit range, we're right back at our above our 5-year average and just under last year's average. Wheatfield would have come in 2021, which is part of the reason why it was so high last year. Yeah. We also compare where those new units are occurring. So we look at the city share versus the county. This chart shows you at this point we're projecting to have about half of the new units in the county happen within the city and half happen outside the city. That over the last 8 or 9, 10 years has kind of been historically the trend for new units in the county, half and half, with the exception of the last couple years. Last 2 years, it's been in the 75, 77% area for new units inside the city. Again, that's going to be driven by larger projects, larger multifamily projects. Our single family has pretty much stayed, it bumped up over the last couple of years, but those larger percentages and numbers are driven by the Wheatfields and others, projects like that. We also measure and track how many, what's our inventory and capacity to develop single family and 2-family vacant lots. So we have a lot of plats that have been platted over the last since 1970. which would be what we would call more of the prime platted lots. And if they haven't been built on and they have a street or they have a benefit district with them, and they're shovel ready, then we call those prime vacant lots, meaning they're ready to go. There's not a whole lot more that needs to be done. And so when we count those as buildable and shovel ready. So we have about a little bit over 4.5 years on our 2-year average, on our pace that we had the last couple of years, which was, as you saw, a little higher, a lot higher than it was this current year. But on that pace, we have about 4.5 years of buildable lots. We have another 10 years almost of planned lots. These are platted lots that happened after 1970. Switching to the commercial side of things, the projected permits on the commercial side is about even. So our commercial activity has not dropped at all since last year. It's a little bit under a 5-year average. The last couple of years affected because of the pandemic and coming out of that. When you look overall at the permit values, doesn't tell you anything too different than what you're hearing. Those overall permit values are lower than last year by about 14% and about 7% from the 5-year average. And then we just kind of give an idea of some of the permits that have come through. And these are going to be the highest valued, top 10 highest valued permits. Starting at the top there, you see the Mars Project Y. I believe that's the Twix bar, if I'm not mistaken. So they're adding on to that right now as we speak. Some of the kind of notable projects that you may see out in the community that came in this year and that are under construction would be the McDonald's rebuild at 29th in California. Stormont Vale has done 2 additions, one to their cancer center and then one to what they're calling building blocks 2, a couple blocks away from the cancer center. And then there's the 785 Beer Company, everyone's favorite at 45th and about Topeka Boulevard. It's the old skating rink. So that's, if you go by there, they're doing some demo work on the inside there right now. So that's going to end up being a microbrew, I believe. So be prepared for that. I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions. But that gives you a little flavor of what's, again, where things are. Haven't seen a ton of new, bigger projects since then to bring you up to date. But if you have any questions, I can try and help.
Yes, sir, Mr. Nigger.
I am curious, so we're seeing that the commercial permits are holding rather steady, even though the housing units have taken a dip.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know what's explaining the divergence there?
Well, Commissioner Nager, we usually do a lot more commercial permits to begin with than residential or housing permits, at least for new construction. So I don't think there's, if you know anything about where real estate has been in the last couple years or last year in the housing industry, we are tight. We are very tight, and so new construction, borrowing is tight, or is certainly more expensive now. Values have gone up. So I think I think it just needs to settle down and give some surety to some folks before they move forward with their projects, from what it sounds like. So I think that would be a big part of the divergence.
All right.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other questions, comments regarding the report? All right, well, thank you for that information. And I guess now we will move on to the missing middle code amendments.
Yes, we're back. We'll get that pulled up. So, since we last talked about missing middle code amendments, we went out and deployed a survey on accessory dwelling units that can helpfully give us some sense of where the community's temperature is, any potential issues that we need to pay attention to as we develop these code amendments, and really to help you give us what you think, what you think of how this factors into your perception of these, of ADUs and the code amendments. So with that in mind, I'm going to introduce Will Sharp. He's one of two Will Sharps in our department. And I'm going to give him that so he can walk you through the survey results.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, like what Mr. Feyender was saying, these are the results for the ADU survey. The survey was conducted August 27th through October 2nd when it was open. Basic overview of the survey. We had 229 total responses. Top responding zip codes of 66606, 04, and 14 within the city. Some basic summary stats for this survey, and the average respondent taking this survey made over $60,000 a year and was over the age of 45. And the majority of survey takers own their own home that took this survey. Breaking down the demographics a little bit more, with the age category, we had the largest response coming from the 35 to 44-year-old group, and then scattered throughout with the other age groups there. Household income, as well as you see, the majority of respondents had an income of over $85,000. And the vast majority of people that took the survey said that they own their own homes. And here's a breakdown of the zip codes that took part of the survey with, as you can see, the top 3 zip codes at the bottom there. So getting into the main section of the survey with the questions that we had. First question that we asked: if you were to build an ADU on your property, what would be the main purpose? Now, as you can see, 99 responded with not interested. But looking past that, you can see that people responded with space for relatives to live, supplement your income, etc. Next question we had is, if you were to live in an ADU, what would be the main reason? Again, had 92 respond with not interested. However, the second largest response from the question came from affordability being a reason for to live in an accessory dwelling unit. Next question we had: if an ADU was built in your neighborhood, what would be the biggest concern? And not surprisingly, 96 people responded with the character of the neighborhood changing with these accessory dwelling units possibly being placed in neighborhoods. Although, as you can see, the second response, the second largest response, people saying they had no concern. Question after that, how likely are you to build or rent an ADU if allowed? Again, largest response coming from 99 people saying just very unlikely. However, if we had 54 responses overall from the very likely or likely group saying that, yes, we would be likely either to build or rent an ADU. Another question we had: how important is it for the ADU to look similar to the primary home if one were built in your neighborhood? And over half responded with very important, which is something that, yeah, we would keep in mind. Next, we asked about the approval process for how we would want ADUs to be administered. So with that, we had almost an even split, but with 48%, the majority wanting an administrative decision over discretionary, and also 6% saying I don't know. Finally, we had our last question, the big question. Do you think ADUs should be permitted within City of Topeka single-family neighborhoods? Top response with 79 votes was yes, with certain conditions, followed up with 63 responses saying no, not under any conditions. However, again, if you put together the yes with no conditions and the yes with certain conditions, you can see that there is interest in ADUs inside Topeka. And I went further down and broke this down by age group so we could see who was saying what here. It's only 5 respondents from the 18 to 24 group, but said no, not under any conditions, that group. Next, we had 25 to 34-year-olds. The top response being yes with certain conditions, followed by yes with no conditions. 35 to 44-year-olds responded with yes with certain conditions and maybe with conditions. 45 to 50-year-old age group again showed the top response with yes with certain conditions, followed by yes with no conditions. 55 to 64, the 55 to 64-year-old age group, top response from that age category was no, not under any conditions. But again, followed up by yes with certain conditions as second. Finally, we had 65 plus, top response being no, not under any conditions. And then second with yes with certain conditions. And finally, this is a word cloud made from the comments received on the survey at the very end. The full written out comments, I believe, are included in the agenda that you can read through. And for the most part, yes, the comments are well thought out on both sides, you could say, but the concerns, a lot came up with housing, then different neighborhoods, certain things like that. But what I believe this survey does say is that there is interest in ADUs inside Topeka here. Concerns about ADUs fitting into neighborhoods, fitting into the character of neighborhoods. I believe the planning department, we can guide this process through either design guidelines or regulations, design review guidelines that can either be implemented through discretionary or administrative approval. But other cities have gone through this process. So there's a lot to learn from what other cities have done here in the region and across the country. But I believe that, yes, I believe that there is interest in ADUs. And with that, I'll take any questions that you have.
Are there any questions of staff regarding the survey results? Yes, Mr. Nair.
One of the concerns that I saw pop up repeatedly was talking about how many vacant lots are in the city. They kind of framed it as doing this would be leaving that that option of filling those vacant lots untried as an option. My understanding, though, is that this is something that could really complement the vacant lot thing. I guess I wanted to check with city staff about what their feelings were about those two working together or not.
Yeah, I believe that it's not an either or with this, and with an ADU ordinance in single family neighborhoods, I believe that this could be more of like another tool in the toolbox that neighbors and developers can use. But I don't know. Bill or Dan wanna?
Yeah, I would add exactly to that. Look at it as an incentive to fill vacant houses and lots, not as we have too many, we will have too many. So if you're the school of, yes, we have, yeah, there are vacant homes, and some in good neighborhoods, some in not as good neighborhoods, and I would look at this as there must be a reason and why those are vacant. And if it's an economic reason, this is absolutely an economic incentive to add a half unit. I look at it as a half unit basically to the property. We have talked about family situations or just having diversity in housing, but that's another complementary reason for these. But yes, I think that vacant lot and vacant house is can be incentivized with this tool.
I have one comment or a couple, you know me. I agree with you. I think overall there is support for this measure. The group that sat down at a meeting and all filled out the survey all the same way. I think they need education. I think actually a lot of this just revolves around community education from this step forward. There's enough ground level support, but I think once you start doing what you just did, explaining some of the incentives, some of the motivations, no, we can't build one in a historic district without other permissions involved, that I think the city will find that it's actually a very good deal and will help solve our problem of housing.
Mr. Chairman, I wish the results, I wish the numbers were more positive, but I would hope that you guys don't see it as discouraging any efforts or slowing down the effort with ADUs.
Yeah, if I may, I was trying to parse through this and look at those silver linings, Commissioner Kaup. There are some that are very apparent, but think of even those folks who, not everybody is going to want one, live in one, and that's really not the point. The point is just to have another option and choice. Even if you looked at it that way, where was it? How likely are you to build or rent an ADU if allowed? That's page 5. Very likely and likely, and we need to do percentages on these, but so we're at 54 out of 2. I mean, okay, so let's just round that off to say somewhere between 20 and 25% of the respondents said they were likely or very likely to own or rent an ADU. 88% of our zoning is single family that it does not allow. So, I mean, even if you had 20 to 25% of the people in the community wanting to live or rent in one, I think that's a pretty big number, actually. If this survey says anything, and we're not, we understand, we understand there was limitations on this, but even so, I think that says something. I mean, even if we had 10% people that wanted to, were likely or very likely, I think that would have been a success. Not a success, but a positive sign we should do something.
I don't want to be dismissive of the survey.
Yeah.
I do want to be respectful of people's opinions on here, but it is a survey that was responded to by 229 people out of 140, whatever we have, 140,000, 130, 40,000 people in this community. But you are going to have to be responsive or be prepared for a reaction of saying, well, you did a survey and the majority of the people who responded were favorable. And have to be able to come back on that point without being dismissive of the survey responses. But I would hope it'd be full speed ahead, Bill.
And that's really what we're here to hear from you as a commission, because we're certainly not interested in moving forward if you see things differently. We haven't even we haven't developed any sort of professional recommendation other than to get this to you, get the survey out, see what it says. Obviously, there's going to be we have plenty of models from other cities. Kansas City, Missouri just adopted one while we were mid-survey. We've got other communities that would be peers have done the same thing. So, the education part is a great point because this was a cold survey. We didn't really do anything to prep folks for what this is or what it could be. So I think the next, in fact, we've sat down with a few folks after this that asked us those questions and pointedly, and I think they walked away feeling very differently once, you had the benefit of seeing the presentation, why there are some benefits here. You had so you have a little bit of background, and they didn't. So more of that, I think would serve everybody well. Not trying to push anything that is not going to be reflective of the community's desires. So we look to you to make those judgments for us, and we will certainly do what you want us to do from this point forward.
Mr. Chairman, if I could make just one last comment. The survey results and the comments, Bill, kind of reinforce the point that I've made repeatedly, that I think there are some zoning classifications, if this goes forward, assuming it goes forward, there'd be some zoning classifications where ADUs could be a permitted use. But I think other areas where a conditional use is the better approach in order to assuage have the public hearing opportunity to assuage concerns of neighbors.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago where most of you adopted a recommended short-term rentals in single-family neighborhoods, which is another way of addressing that vacancy question that comes up and reuse of property. And the way our demographics are going, and this isn't just Topeka, but that bubble is just getting older, and we're going to have more and more vacancies come online if we do not have more choices and purposes to use these single-family neighborhoods. So balancing those interests, I would say, sure, we're happy to bring something back to you, more crafted, more in draft form. If we'd like to pull some people together and work on that as a task force, some of you volunteers, and then I think that's kind of the next step. Is we, again, that education part, from talking to people, from reading those comments, I mean, there's some trepidation, not knowing what this thing is. And so I think the sooner you could draft draft those criteria for when something is allowed by right, when something comes back to you. How big can these be? Do they have to have owners, living on the property? Do they have to have parking? Do they have to have you know, we really do need to apply these to all neighborhoods uniformly. That is one thing I don't think we wouldn't want to get away from. If you're an R1 neighborhood here, an R1 neighborhood here, the same rules would apply. Other than that, yeah, that may be our next, I think that is probably the next step if you want us to go there, and we'll start working on that. We have one ready to go, so just.
Any other comments from anyone else on the commission? I'm all in favor of you taking it to the next step and show us what you got in mind.
Mr. Chairman, does the commission want to have a deadline that Bill has to abide by?
I don't know if anyone wants to propose a deadline or not, but I'm not looking to tell them it's a deadline. I figure they'll get to it, and it seems to be something they're trying to move forward with by bringing it forward to us. So I don't think it's something they're going to be sitting on. So I'm not.
Yeah, deadline is the wrong word. I shouldn't have used that, but is it possible to see a draft within a couple months, Bill?
I believe so. We could roll one out right now. But I don't think we need to have the lens of what we just heard in this survey applied to it, and then bring that back to you. We've also talked about meeting with some folks before it comes back. I think we need to do that. So yes, probably within the next 2 months, I would say. The other question for you would be, do you want a public hearing? Not an official public hearing, but do you want us to advertise and get the word out to say, hey, you know, we're going to be taking this matter up at the Planning Commission, come down and share your thoughts with the Planning Commission, sort of thing. Again, an unofficial sort of public meeting, if you will. That would be more for how you'd like to handle that.
Yes.
I think we had some conversation before about trying to do some grassroots work with NIAs and other organizations to get some basis support out there.
We can,
before going to a hearing.
I mean, you can call it a hearing, but again, it's kind of community education is really what it'll end up being, and a chance for people to have their voices heard. So giving them a seat at the table.
And tying in with the community education part, if we were to do that, which I would like to, I'd like to have some simple, short information so that the public comment is based on what it actually is and not what it's perceived to be. I'm fine with having discussions with people who approve or disapprove of what we're actually trying to do, but I don't, it's a waste of their time and our time for them to be angry at us for something that we're not even trying to do.
I think it's a matter of how it's coordinated and presented. I think if that's a consideration to keep in mind, yes.
And I don't think we can restrict how people want to express themselves.
No.
So that's going to happen.
But we can definitely sway.
Okay, that I really feel like inviting people here is, we can do some grassroots stuff. I'm not saying we're not doing that, but I think ultimately when you're talking about something that affects the entire community, it's really hard to do enough focus groups and get a true feeling for what's out there. So we will look at the agenda and sequences. So we will bring the draft back to you, and either it's hard to do over the, I don't know, sometimes we try to avoid the holiday agenda for community type things. So we may wait till the beginning of the year for that. Just so you know, if you feel differently, let us know.
Okay. Anything else on that issue? Last one is communications to the commission.
I think I'm all communicated out.
Oh, all right. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Second. All right, we are adjourned.